Electricity prices continue to rise, and it's beginning to become a political liability for Republicans. A recent Consumer Price Index report found electricity prices are increasing at double the rate of inflation, 5.5% over the past year. Joining us to discuss what it means for consumers and how it could affect elections next year, Rachel Frazen, staff writer here at The Hill who covers energy and the environment. So Rachel, on the campaign trail, the president said he would cut energy and electricity prices in half within 18 months of taking office. So far, it doesn't seem like he's on pace to accomplish that. What's your take?
So that's a very difficult thing to promise because it can take a little bit of time for any policy action to really show up on the grid, right? So at this time, we are not necessarily seeing the impacts of Trump administration policies because it can take time. Prices are increasing. With that being said, not all of the Trump administration's policies are necessarily expected to bring down prices. You know, Democrats and Republicans over the last several years have been supportive generally of boosting data center construction. Data centers are one thing that are expected to raise electricity prices. Same thing with renewable energy. This administration has really cracked down on renewable energy, whether that's cutting subsidies, whether that's, trying to block projects, and that kind of thing may end up ultimately increasing the prices that consumers end up paying for their electric bills.
What did you find are the causes of upward pressure on energy prices, since President Trump has taken office?
There are a few things. One, like I mentioned, is data centers. That's something that has sort of been in the works for a while. That's not just a Trump administration thing, but the data centers are a major factor. Another thing is something like wildfires, which, especially in the western United States, are really putting upward pressure on prices because, it's very expensive to have to rebuild those power lines and secure them to make sure that they're less vulnerable for the future.
The president has been on this, kind of crusade against renewable energy. He's been especially critical of wind energy, froze new permits and leases, paused some projects mid-construction. What's been the impact of that?
So we may not be seeing price impacts of that quite yet, but ultimately those moves are expected to increase electricity prices because that's just less power on the grid, right? If you've got, especially those projects that are already underway that they're trying to block, if you've got that project already under construction, if you've got a utility that's already made those investments and then they can't even get the power at the end of it, that's something that's expected to bring up prices.
And you write that energy producers have been hit with this kind of 1-2 punch. The Biden administration implemented regulations to demand more energy from renewables and then subsidized that with the Inflation Reduction Act. Then Republicans come to power and they pulled those subsidies. What has been the impact of those two differing ways to look at energy policies?
So over the last several years, a lot of blue states have put forward, renewable energy standards where they're requiring a certain percentage of their electricity to come from renewable energy. That's part of an effort to combat climate change. Now, those moves came in conjunction with the Inflation Reduction Act, the Democrats' big climate bill that put a lot of money towards subsidizing those renewable energy projects, so then that wouldn't be so expensive. So now that a lot of those subsidies are getting pulled, but those policies are still in place, that is sort of a 1-2 punch, like you said, where, now it's going to be expensive to do this shift and they're not being subsidized. So Democrats and Republicans are kind of working together on that one, I guess, sort of inadvertently in a way that might, bring up prices for consumers.
You write about this push to increase the ability of U.S. natural gas producers to export their product overseas. How is that expected to put upward pressure on energy prices domestically?
So the U.S. pays a relatively cheap price for natural gas, and that's because there have been limits and difficulties, both sort of, in the regulatory space, but also just sort of feasibility limitations as far as how much of that gas they can ship abroad. And so because of that, it's cheaper to get natural gas here in the U.S. than it is in other places because we produce a lot of it here and then it gets used by consumers. But if you open up those foreign markets, then that gas can go elsewhere. That's increasing the demand. That might raise prices, and Americans may see prices for natural gas that are more in line with the rest of the world. Now, gas is one of many energy sources that we use to get electricity here in the United States, but it is a major one, and it could also bring up electricity prices as well as, prices for home heating.
Is the cause of some of that the war in Ukraine, where Russian gas supplies have been cut off to Europe, and so the U.S. has been trying to increase its ability to export liquefied natural gas? Is that what's going on here?
Well, that's definitely a piece of it, right? Is that a lot of Europeans are trying to get off of Russia as a supplier of gas. The U.S. has encouraged that both, for security reasons as well as, to help U.S. companies that are producing that gas. But, if more of that gas goes abroad, that is less here at home. Now they could produce more, but that gets a little bit complicated and economically wonky. And so if you do have more of that going abroad, that may make it more difficult to have enough here at home, or to have it at least at a lower price here at home.
Yeah, subjecting natural gas prices to the international market could be not a great result for some consumers here in the U.S., while it could be a good result for some of the producers. But we will leave the conversation at that for now. Rachel Frazen, thanks so much for your insight.
Thank you for having me.